So we are going to be starting with our first lecture. Okay, so if you remember, the very first lecture of this course was about introducing you the 4 modules which are originally a part of this course. The first one was thermodynamics. We completed it. The heat transfer, we are almost done with it. Then we are going to be starting heat ventilation and air conditioning, and probably we will not be able to do the materials of this course because we started this course a little late, and there were 1 week of holiday for Eid. Then we had 2 weeks of we did the first 2 weeks were we did not have any classes, so we will probably not be able to finish the materials, but we will start the heat and ventilation after classes. So this was the lecture plan. So the advice was to be active and ask questions. The first book, the first module was Introduction to Thermodynamics. So then the textbooks were you remember Fundamentals of Engineering and Thermodynamics by Moran, and Applied Thermodynamics for Engineers and Technologists by McConaughey. So why we study thermodynamics? We study thermodynamics because there are many applications in heat generation, steam power plants, or when you are trying to design a building, because you would want your building to be more comfortable, or in gas turbine engine, and there are 100 more many applications of thermodynamics. What is thermodynamics? Thermodynamics is a science concerning the relationship between heat work and properties of the system. For example, if you supply heat to a system, its property can change. It means it can melt, right, or it can evaporate. And also, if you supply heat to a system, you can get some work out of it, just like your internal combustion engine in your car. So thermodynamics deals with heat, work, and properties of your system. How energy from fossil fuels is converted into mechanical work. So this is an area of thermodynamics. The laws of thermodynamics are hypotheses based on our daily observation. So thermodynamics laws are a hypothesis, but they have never been proven wrong. They have never been proven wrong. These laws of thermodynamics. Thermodynamics applies to systems in equilibrium. So this was something which I have put a question mark, so that I will tell you later what does it mean, why thermodynamics applies to system in equilibrium. Okay, then I introduced to you the first law of thermodynamics, the 4 laws of thermodynamics. The 0th law is that if a body A and B are at the same temperature, and a body B and C are at the same temperature, it means the body A and B are also at the same temperature. Or another means, if body A and B are in thermal equilibrium means that they are not going to be transferring any heat. Why? Because they are at the same temperature. Now you have studied heat transfer. Now you should know that if the bodies are at the same temperature, there is not going to be any heat transfer. So energy is not going to flow from A to B or B to A. Okay, so if A and B are in thermal equilibrium and B and C are also in thermal equilibrium, it means A and C are also in thermal equilibrium. That was the first law, and it helped us define the thermometer, right? The first law of thermodynamics is the most common one that you see, energy conservation law. That let's say if you put 10 joules of energy in something, you are going to get back only 10. You're not going to get 11, possibly 9. You're going to get back, but never 11. The second law of thermodynamics says that energy flows from hot to cold. Or in other words, if you put 10 joules of energy into some system, the most probably you are going to get is 9. Probably you're not even going to get 10 out of it. That is the second law of thermodynamics. The entropy always increases. The heat flows from hot to cold, right? And the third law, you can say, was the chaos is tamed at absolute zero. It means if you bring down a system to an absolute zero, means minus 273 degree centigrade, at that temperature, there is almost no vibration and there is no motion. Everything is static. So the chaos is tamed at absolute zero. Okay, what are the basic concepts? So of course, we are familiar with the concepts of temperature and pressure, and we have been long familiar with it. Temperature is, our feeling, and pressure is also our feeling. Let's say if you're going to have a high pressure environment, you are going to feel kind of suffocated. So you will feel that there is a lot of pressure on you. That you are going to feel that there is a lot of bombardment of air molecules on you. So of course, that will be a high pressure environment. And if you feel a lot of temperature, so it means there are a lot of high energy molecules are bombarding at you. So we have been familiar with these quantities for a very long time, but we have to understand what is actually temperature and what is actually pressure. Temperature is is a measure of kinetic energy of the molecules which are hitting on you. That is what a temperature is at the micro scale. But we understand it at temperature, and of course different molecules can have different energies, so it would be very difficult to study this. So thermodynamics makes these things easy. So all this information, it has been summed into temperature. We call it temperature. Similarly, we know that at a wall, these molecules are applying this pressure by by transferring their momentum. So they are having these elastic collisions happening with the cylinder walls or at my body. So this is the pressure that we feel, and this is because of the force or the momentum they transfer to the molecules transfer to the wall. This is called pressure. So remember the earlier statement, thermodynamics applies to systems in equilibrium. Thermodynamics only applies to systems in equilibrium. Why? Because wherever you measure pressure at this location, at this location, at this location, at this location, it has to be the same. And it can only be same if the system is in statistical equilibrium. Means at any time, of course, you have molecules going there, you have molecules going there, and you have different molecules hitting at this place, different molecules hitting at this place, different molecules hitting at this place. It means you have so many molecules that if you measure the pressure here, it remains almost constant. Or if you measure here, it remains the same value as here. So it means the system is in equilibrium. The pressure at this location is not larger, or the pressure at this location is not smaller than any other location. So it means the system is in an equilibrium. Or in other words, the temperature if you measure at this location or at this location or this location inside a container, and the temperature is constant, it means only then you can define the temperature of that system to be T, any value, any value. So it means the system is in equilibrium. Temperature and pressure in a circular container would not be uniform if the gas inside is not in equilibrium. This is a statement I hope you are able to understand now. Temperature, pressure, and volume of a gas are its state variables. They define the state of your system. So if you want to define the state of your system, you can define pressure, volume, right? So of course, if you have pressure and volume, you can measure the temperature from ideal gas law, right? And if the property, let's say, if the phase of your system changes, then that also becomes a state variable: solid, liquid, or gas. So thermodynamic definitions, anything that is under consideration is called a system. For example, this dog can be a consideration, and a boundary is an imaginary ball. It can be imaginary or it can be a real ball. For example, the boundary here is glass. It's a solid boundary. Here, the boundary is this thing. So anything that is happening outside is, the surrounding. Anything that is inside is the system. So this is an open system. Why? Because through the boundary, both mass and the mass can flow. The CO2 can be released from this gas, and he's also taking oxygen inside. He's drinking food. He's drinking water. He's drinking food, eating food. So it means there is a mass transfer across the boundary. So this must be an open system. Okay. Now let's look at this system. This is a totally isolated system, thermodynamically speaking. Thermodynamically speaking, this is an isolated system. What do I mean? Thermodynamic terms, that no heat or no mass can go inside this system, so it has to be an isolated system. So this is a closed system. Mass cannot flow in, means the air cannot go in, or the water cannot go in, but heat can go in or out. So this is a closed system. Closed would mean no mass transfer. Open would mean mass transfer. And isolated would mean no mass or heat transfer. So instead of going full screen, I think it's best if I do something like that. Hope you are able to see this. So reversible versus an irreversible system. If you do things slowly, the things are reversible. Why? Because you are not, creating any large unstable regions. For example, if you pull this piston very fast, so you are going to kind of create a vacuum here, and you are going to create this tide. And this system is not in equilibrium. When the system is not in equilibrium, it means that there are going to be losses and the system is not going to be reversible. Why? Let's say you are delivering this work, right? No, in other words, sorry, this system is delivering some work to its surrounding by being expanded. Okay. Now, if you want to push this work, or in other words, let's say this system is delivering some work, W1, and this is delivering W2. Why? So this W1 is going to be large. So it means you are going to get more work out from your system if the process is slowly done. But if it is done fastly, then the work that you are going to get is not going to be large. Why? You can see that there is going to be a vacuum here. And when there is vacuum, you see not a lot of force will be pushing this cylinder. So it means the work that you are going to get is smaller. Similarly, and this is not going to be reversible. Similarly, in a reversible, this is a reversible contraction, or let's say reversible compression. So you compress your system slowly, and the amount of work that you will deliver is going to be small. But if you try to push it very fast, right? So you are going to feel a lot of resistance. For example, have you ever tried to slap your hand on water with very fast speed? You will feel a lot of resistance. But if you try to submerge your hand slowly through the water, it will be easier. So slapping your hand very fast against the surface of the water is going to be an irreversible process kind of thing. I hope you have experienced this thing. So this is kind of, trying to slap your hand against this water. So this will be an irreversible process and you will have to do more work, W2. But if you try to, let's say, submerge your hand or let's say compress this thing slowly, then the work that you will need to apply is going to be smaller. So if you remember, we had skipped this thing, but now I think you can read it and it will be easier for you to understand. The main points are the driving force is infinitely small, means you drive this thing or compress this thing very slowly. In a irreversible process, the driving force can be large. PV work is done across a pressure difference delta dP, small pressure, and the PV work is done across a difference delta P. Delta P is going to be large. Okay, a reversible heat transfer can take place across temperature dt. The temperature difference is going to be small, and the reversible heat transfer can take place. But if the temperature difference is not small, instead of dt, it is delta T. So the heat transfer would be irreversible. This is a real process. This is an ideal process. It takes a lot of time to, all for infinite time to complete. This takes finite time to complete. It is an imaginary process. This is a natural or real process. Throughout the process, the system remains infinitely close to a state of equilibrium. Do you remember quasi-equilibrium? If you have a cylinder and you have many small pebbles in it. So doing an isentropic or doing a reversible expansion would be similar to, raising pebbles one by one. So that would be an isotropic, or let's say isotropic or reversible expansion. That if you have a lot of small pebbles lying on the piston, and if you want to expand that gas, you are going to lift those pebbles one by one. That will be a reversible expansion. So that is an analogy, but in reality, expansions happen in a finite time, and every process is almost a irreversible process. So these were the definitions. Then in next class, please let me know if you have any questions, because we have a lot of material to cover. I would like to cover as much as possible today. Okay, then we.
सर ये जो सर ये जो प्रेशर और टेम्परेचर की एक्सप्लेनेशन स्लाइड्स में है ना, वो बुक में डिफरेंट है.
क्या बुक में क्या है बेटा?
सर बुक्स में कुछ ज़्यादा डिटेल है, वो टेम्परेचर स्केल सेल्सियस केल्विन के बारे में भी है.
I'm not going to say that the book explanation is wrong. Because beta, this class, I had so much material to cover, so I swapped that explanation with a small figure from NASA, and which explains everything. So the book explanation is not going to be wrong, but it is going to be a lot detailed. But do not worry, you can skip it. What is pressure? Pressure is the force that you feel because of bombardment of the molecule. Okay? I don't think so that it's very hard to understand. Temperature is a kinetic energy that they transfer to you. That is all. Of course, I told you this Michael Moran book is a good book. Why? Why is it opening in something else?
सर आप कंटिन्यू कर दें, मैं आपको ईमेल सेंड कर दूं.
So remember, I'm not going to full screen because it creates problems. Thermodynamics applies to systems in equilibrium. Remember this. This is a very important statement. Process that causes states P, V, and T to change must therefore be a quasi-equilibrium process. So it means, let's say, in a thermodynamic, when you are studying thermodynamics, you would think that a process that is causing your PV to change must therefore be, if you want thermodynamics to apply it on it, so this process that is changing your PV and T must be a quasi-equilibrium process. Means you lift your pebble, your system goes out of equilibrium for an extremely small amount of time, and it adjusts in a very small amount of time. Means the gas, let's say if you're expanding, you create a very small region of vacuum, and then that gas readjusts itself, and then again you go into. So I'm not sure, honestly, I haven't looked at the definitions of pressure in this book. So what he is saying that the force that you feel, not sure, beta. I'm not sure what if you are saying is right. I don't think that the explanation is not different. It cannot be any different. But of course, it can be in much detail. But you don't worry about it. Because it's a 1 credit hour course, and we have to cover many courses: thermodynamics, HVAC, heat transfer. So we have to summarize things. So this is not a real process. It's just a definition, or it's just a made-up process, so that you understand what does quasi-equilibrium means. So quasi-equilibrium means that you do your change, or bring in change in your system so slowly that the system almost remains in equilibrium. For example, if you have a 100 meter cube volume, you increase it only by 0.0 meter cube. If you are trying to expand. So it means if you increase by so little amount, so the new volume that you have will be immediately filled by your gas, right? So it means your system will go out of equilibrium for an extremely or negligible amount of time. So this means we are going to call it quasi-equilibrium, means almost equilibrium process. And it will be equivalent to that if you are, let's say if you have a pressure, and if you want to decrease the pressure on this system, that would mean that only lift one pebble, not lift all of them. Let's say if you had 5 kg of weight applied on it, do not lift it all of a sudden. That would mean that you are sending your gas in non-equilibrium region, and that will take it away from thermodynamics. In reality, that is what actually happens. Remember that. In reality, that is what actually happens. The pressures change suddenly. But in thermodynamics, we do our calculation based on an ideal process, and then we can apply some scaling on it. Let's say we say, okay, the work that you are going to get, only 80% of the work we calculate using thermodynamics. So thermodynamics will give you the maximum amount of work that you can get from your system. But in reality, that will be less than that. I think I'm going to skip it, this part. It is not very relevant. I think I'm just going to go to this conclusion. This conclusion says that the amount of work that you do on your system changes the energy content of your system. The mechanical work changes the kinetic energy of the system. Similarly here, that if you do not apply any force on your system, the total energy of the system remains constant. Energy is either kinetic or potential, remains conserved unless some work is done on the system. If you do not do any work, the energy will remain constant. It can be either in form of kinetic energy or in form of potential energy, whatever. Okay, the energy will remain conserved if you do not do any work. But if you do some work, it is going to change the energy content of your system. These were the the basic ideas behind it. Okay, what is the definition of thermodynamic work? Mechanical work, you understand. Mechanical work is that you apply a force on your system and you do some work. But what is thermodynamic work? Thermodynamic work is done by a system on its surrounding if a sole effect on everything external to the system could have been lifting of a weight. Suppose you had a gas, okay, and there was a 5 kg weight. You had a gas in a cylinder and there was a 5 kg weight placed on top of it, right? So suddenly, let's say that gas expands. So it means that gas is doing work on its surrounding. Another example would be you have seen all of you have seen the pressure cooker inside your house, right? So of course the pressure cooker stays calm during the first few minutes. Then the whistle starts to blow up. That weight goes up. So it means that steam was going out and it was doing some work in lifting that weight. But of course that work was done. The work was done on the weight only because we were supplying heat. So that the heat we were supplying, some of it was used to cook your food and some of it was used to lift the weight of the pressure cooker. So that lifting of a weight is called the thermodynamic work done. So in the initial part of our study, we thought we supposed that the work done by the system on the surrounding is positive. So, this is the amount of work that you get. So you think that this is the positive work. And the amount that the work that you have to do on the system is negative. Means, you can consider it to be a loss. Michael Moran book consider work done on the system to be loss. For example, supplying fuel to your engine is kind of a loss. And when you supply that energy, that is kind of a loss, you gain work with which you are able to drive the car. This is one perspective. Some people think that we are ourselves our system. It means the amount of work we get is positive, which is different from this convention. So you can do any conventions you want. I do not care as far as you do it correctly. Okay. So of course you can calculate the amount of work done because of expansion is this thing. So let's say if your gas expands, your dx is positive, right? Your dx is positive. And you have pressure, you have A. So the change in volume is A times D. At the moment, of course, this is the force PA and dx is the amount of distance. So the work done is force multiplied by distance. So PA dx. So the amount of work that you do on your surrounding is PA dx. Of course, dx is positive if the gas expands. So this work is going to be positive. But you remember in the later part of our course, we changed delta W to minus P dV. So of course, PA dx is delta V, as you can see here. This becomes delta V. Okay. So in the later part of the book, we change it to minus P dV. Why? Because we want the work done on the surrounding to be negative in the later part. But initial part of the course, we thought that the work done by the system on the surrounding was positive. So this is the work being delivered to the system, surrounding, which is, can you hold on for a minute? Okay, so this is the work at the moment done to the surrounding, and we are taking it to be positive. Now there is a question: why not dW? Why delta W? Why? Because the work that you do in your system is going to be dependent on what path you take. Why? Because when we integrate P dV, so that is going to be the area under the curve. So area under the curve changes with the path. Of course, path A and path B are different. For example, the pressure is decreasing very fast in A as compared to B. So you could argue that maybe you were, when the pressure was going from P1 to P2 with path A, maybe you were, getting some energy out from your system. So that was the pressure. That is why the pressure was decreasing so fast, right? That could be a possibility. But if you remember, how to say? But if you, let's say, PV is equal to RT. So this process could be constant temperature path, and this could be an adiabatic path. So the amount of work that you get in an adiabatic path would be larger. Why? Because you do not extract any heat out from your system. So, it is going to be dependent on how much energy was drawn during the path. Some paths can be adiabatic, some paths can be isobaric, some paths can be isothermal. Isothermal paths are which do not change the temperature, right? For example, Boyle's law is a isothermal path. PV is equal to constant, but we know that PV is equal to nRT. We know that. So if PV is equal to constant, it means you are keeping your temperature constant. So the amount of work that you get from your system or the amount of work that you do on your system is going to be dependent on a path. What do I mean by path? Some paths can be isobaric. For example, isobaric path would be from this path to this point to this path, means the pressure does not change and the work done would be maximum, isn't it? Isobaric. But now try to find out why the pressure would be, let's say, why the work done would be maximum in an isobaric process. Why? Because when you are allowing your gas to expand, your volume is increasing. You would think that the pressure would decrease, right? That is the natural way of thinking. But in an isobaric pressure, in an isobaric process, the pressure remains constant. The only way that pressure can remain constant is that you are also supplying some heat to the system, so that the pressure, which was supposed to go down, but it remains constant because you are supplying some heat. मेरी बात समझ आ रही है आपको? In an isobaric process, when your volume increases, you would think that your pressure would go down. But if the process is isobaric, it means you are supplying some heat. So when you are supplying some heat, it means you are getting some more amount of work from your system. Why? Because you are getting more amount only at some expense. What was the expense? You were supplying the heat. So what I'm trying to tell you is that when you look at different paths in a PV diagram, you do not know which one is which. Means something could be isobaric, some could be isotropic or isothermal. So the amount of work that you get from your system is going to be dependent on what path you take. And of course, in a PV diagram, it is difficult to specify if the heat was traveling inside the system or outside the system, because that is also going to determine the amount of work that you get from your system. Okay. But if you do not supply any heat, the amount of work that you get will be maximum in a reversible process. Suppose if you do not supply any heat, if the process is adiabatic, suppose you do not allow any energy to flow in or out. Okay. Only then your system is going to give you the maximum work. And if it is a reversible process, it means nothing gets lost, right? This is sensible. What is a reversible process? Where you have no losses. So the amount of work that you get is going to be maximum in a reversible process, of course. Okay, conventions of heat added. In the initial part of the project, in initial part of the subject, we are going to say that the amount of heat added to the system is positive and amount of energy taken out from the system is negative. And similarly, the amount of heat that you add or subtract is also going to be dependent on what path. For example, in a adiabatic path, there is no heat added. In an isothermal path, there is heat added. So it is also going to be dependent on path. So the first law of thermodynamics is very simple. It's extremely simple. The change in internal energy or the change in energy content of the system. It can be internal energy, it can be pressure energy or whatever. The change in the energy content of your system is equal to the amount of heat you supply and the amount of minus the amount of work you get. Remember, if you supply 10 joules of energy, let's say, by burning the fuel in your IC engine, for example, if you supply 10 joules of energy and your system gives you 10 joules of work, the work done to the car would be positive in that case, right? So 10 minus 10 would be 0. It means there is no energy addition in your system. So it means the temperature of your, let's say, your IC engine will remain constant. If you are going on motorway at a constant speed, so this equation would be dE will be equal to 0. Means there is no extra energy. The amount of energy that you were putting in is equal to the amount of work being done by the car. So this is simple energy balance, simple accounts. You put 10 joules. If you if you put 10 joules and you supply 7 joules to the surrounding, so it means the positive change would be 3. It's a very simple idea. Of course, you have to do the numericals yourself. I'm just, I don't have time to repeat all the numericals. You have the videos available. I'm just, reviewing what we have studied so far so that you know what is your syllabus. Also, if you have any conceptual questions, you can ask. Why am I full screening it? It gives me problems. So let's not full screen it. Okay, so you remember that the amount of work that you do is dependent on path. So here's an example I give you. So you see, this is a constant pressure path. So of course, you have to go from P1 to P1 V1 to P2 V2. So this is kind of an isentropic or isothermal expansion. It could be, I don't know what it is, but here you see, you are dropping your pressure without changing the volume. How could that happen? How could that happen? Maybe you put your system in the refrigerator. So it means you subtract your heat from your system. The pressure would automatically drop and the volume would not change. Of course, it means you have taken out some energy from the system. And then the amount of work that you get is not going to be as much as here. You see my point? This could be a natural decrease in pressure because of increase in volume. So this is why you get more work out of it. But here, what you could do is you could have put your system in the refrigerator. It means the pressure has already gone down, and then you allow your system to expand to a same volume, and you know that the work you are going to get is not going to be as much. Why? Why is that? Because you see, you had initially subtracted some heat from the system. Subtraction of heat, you can't see it directly from the PV diagram, but you can imagine that why would the pressure drop without changing the volume? It will only drop if you, let's say, take some heat out of the system, right? This is something that you have to understand yourself. Now, in compression, you have to take this system from this path to this path. Okay. Now you are trying to increase the pressure without increasing the volume. So it means you are trying to, supply heat to your system without increasing its volume. So it means you are supplying some heat, right? You are supplying some heat. And then you allow your gas to compress at a constant pressure. So it means the work that you do is going to be large because you had to supply some heat, right? Now, if you had done this process in a reversible way, you would just backtrack your path. You see here, the pressure is suddenly changing. So it cannot be a reversible process. But if you change your pressure and volume smoothly, naturally, so this would be a reversible path, and the amount of work that you get, or sorry, let's say you have to apply is going to be less than this thing. So in expansion, you get less work in a irreversible process, and in compression, you have to do more work. This is a reversible process. The amount of work you got is the amount of work you do. So this is a reversible process. Here, the amount of work you get, let's say, is 10 joules. Then the amount of energy that you need to supply to put it back at its initial location could be 12 joules. Why? Because in real world, you have losses. It's very easy to understand. Okay. So now I had to, ask you this question, which was very easy question. Now, let's say if you had a gas and it was, allowed only in this region, this blue region. Now, suppose you allow this gas to expand and it was vacuum here. And this is the new boundary. What would be the amount of work done by the system? And of course, this is the new system. I have made
zero.
I have made this color lighter so that you can understand that this has expanded. The amount of work would be 0. Why? Because this gas is doing work against nothing. When you do some work, it means you are trying to push the cylinder. But here there is vacuum, there is nothing. So it means you don't have to supply any energy. This gas does not have to supply any energy. Why? Because there is nothing here. If you want to lift some weight, there is weight working against you. Only then you have to supply work. There is nothing working against this gas. So it means it does not have to supply any work. So this is the concept that you have to understand. Okay. This is a very useful concept. So what is the expansion work? You just integrate from volume 1 to volume 2 your PdV diagram, and this is only for a reversible process. Why this is only for a reversible process? Because for an irreversible process, pressure is not uniform in the cylinder. So you can't perform this integration. Because we define pressure only when the system is in equilibrium. We can't define a pressure when the system is not in equilibrium. Do you understand my point? If the system is not in equilibrium, it means inside your gas, you have some molecules lying around at some places and there is vacuum in one place. It means the pressure is not uniform. So it means I can't describe that system with a single pressure. So there is no point in using this equation because I don't even know the pressure in a system which is not in equilibrium. So this will only apply to a system which is a reversible process or in equilibrium. So the first law of thermodynamics says, so I spent this time trying to make you understand the concepts of work and heat. So again, the first law of thermodynamics is just a balance, just your accounts. So I think in that class we did some examples of first law of thermodynamics, and in this class, let's see what we did. Okay, now we move towards a concept called enthalpy, and we define the working fluid and the steam tables. And then some more definitions. What are the intensive properties? What are the extensive properties? Intensive properties are those which are independent of mass. For example, if I ask you to measure the temperature of the room, we are measuring the temperature of the gas, right? Does it depend if the room is big or small? Means a room may have more mass of air if the room is bigger, and if the room would have less mass of air if the room is smaller. But is the temperature going to depend on these things? Of course not. So it means the temperature must be an intensive property, and it's also pressure. Pressure is also an intensive property, but because it is not going to change if you have a bigger room or a smaller room. And also the density of your gas is not going to be dependent on if you have more mass. For example, suppose you have one room and the density of gas is 1.22 kgs per meter cube, right? Then let's say you remove one wall of your room and you combine the two rooms. Now you have double the mass, you have double the gas, right?
But is it going to change the density? No. Is it going to change the pressure? No. It is going to change the temperature? No. But is it going to change the volume of the gas? Yes. Right? Now you have double the room. Is it going to change the amount of internal energy you have? Yes. Because you have more mass and you have more energy. But remember, extensive properties can be made into intensive properties by dividing with mass. For example, is the volume by mass? Let's say I define a new quantity called specific volume. What is specific volume? Volume by mass. So now suppose in the room one, 77, just wait for a minute. I will talk to you in a minute. For example, in room one, you had 10 kgs of gas in 10 meter cube of room. So what is your specific volume? 1, right? Now you break the one wall, you break the wall, and now you have 2 rooms with 20 meter cube and 20 kgs of mass. Again, your specific volume is going to be 1. So the specific volume, which is volume divided by mass, is not going to change, and it is going to be an intensive property. Similarly, internal energy per unit mass. What is internal energy of your system? It is kinetic energy, 1 by 2 mv square. But if you divide it with the mass of the molecule, that becomes 1 by 2 v square. That is independent of the mass, right? Because the specific internal energy would be 1 by 2 v square, not m square. There will not be any m. So extensive properties can be made intensive by dividing with mass. Yes, 77 roll number. What were you trying to say?
Sir, why is the temperature is an intensive property? You can repeat again?
You have one room and your temperature of your gas is 25 degrees. Now you break down your wall and you combine the 2 rooms. You have more mass, right? You have more air in your rooms now because you have a bigger room. Do you agree?
Yes, sir.
Is it going to change the temperature?
No, sir.
So there you have your answer. Any question?
No, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Now let's talk about the definition of enthalpy. Enthalpy is a new variable scientists created. You know why? Do you remember previously I told you that the work done on the system or by the system depends on the path and the PV diagram. But why we have different paths? We have different paths because in some paths it can be adiabatic, means no energy is going into the system or out of the system. Some paths can take energy, means that they can get energy from the surrounding, and some path can rejects energy to the surrounding, right? So the amount of work done by the system is going to be dependent on which path your system is taking. But the PV diagram does not tell us anything about if the heat is getting out or getting in. We have to deduce it ourselves. Do you guys agree? Do you guys agree with this? That we have to try to understand if the heat is going out to the system or inside the system only from the PV diagram. We have to try to guess it. But the PV diagram itself does not give us any information. Do you guys agree?
Yes, sir.
The pressure was dropping suddenly. The PV diagram was not telling me anything. But from my intuition, I was thinking that if the pressure is dropping suddenly, it means we are extracting some heat out of the system. It means the system is losing some energy, heat energy. I had to deduce it. There was not information available on the PV diagram. So scientists created this new variable called enthalpy. This is a very useful variable. It is a combination of internal energy, which is a measure of temperature, plus pressure and V. So whenever your enthalpy changes, let's say if you can measure your enthalpy, you will be able to calculate the amount of heat leaving the system or entering the system. This is a very useful quantity. Now we create it into specific enthalpy, how we divide everything with mass. Of course, internal energy is dependent on mass. Why? Because if you have more mass, you have more internal energy. But if you want to talk about internal energy per unit mass, it is not going to change. Let me give you a very simple example. You go to your market, you buy 5 kgs of rice, right? You have to pay 500 rupees, for example. Now someone else goes to the market and he has to buy 10 kgs of rice. He has to pay 1,000 rupees. So the amounts are different. But so this quantity is a extensive properties, and the price is an extensive property. So the amount of money that you have to pay is dependent on how much mass of rice you are buying. But is there a way to make this properties intensive? Yes. You divide 1000 with 10 kgs of rice, so you get 100. So you deduce that it means that 1 kg of rice must be 100 rupees. Now, you buy 100 kgs of rice or 5000 kgs of rice. Is 100 price going to change? Of course not. So amount of money that you have to pay per kgs of rice has become an intensive property. I think this is the simplest example. Do you guys agree with this?
Yes, sir.
100 rupees does not change with the amount of rice you buy. The price per unit kilogram remains constant. So this is an intensive property now. Someone buys 100 kgs, someone buys 5 kgs, the price remains same. Okay. So now this is an intensive property.
सर यानी प्राइस सेम रहेगी और क्वांटिटी चेंज हो सकती है.
No. Anything that does not change with the amount of mass that you consider. For example, if you go to your smaller room in your house, the temperature is going to be almost the same as the temperature in the bigger room. Right?
Yes.
So it does not change. Or in other words, you take one container of gas and you have 2 containers of gas which are exactly the same, exactly filled with the same gas and exactly at the same temperature. Everything is the same. They are identical containers. Now you take a bigger container and you put the gas of those 2 containers in the bigger container with double the volume. Now tell me if the temperature is going to change. No. Is the volume going to change? Yes.
Yes.
Mass going to
Volume
change.
changes, temperature don't change.
Does not change. Pressure does not change. The mass changes, yes. The amount of energy that you have locked up inside that box, of course, it is increased.
Yes.
But amount of energy per unit mass, that does not change.
Yes, sir.
No change. Why? Because you had, let's say, 10 joules of energy in one box, 10 joules of energy in 2 boxes. Now you add them, it becomes 20 joules of energy. But the amount of energy
Yes.
per unit mass will remain constant. Remember that. So this is enthalpy, specific enthalpy, specific energy when we divide this thing with mass. So pressure is already an intensive property. Now V has become smaller. Generally, the lowercase properties are intensive properties, except temperature. Temperature is intensive properties, but it is written with a capital letter. So except temperature, everything that is written in lowercase is generally intensive properties. So now we have all of them are intensive properties. Enthalpy, remember, is an extensive property, but when you divide it with mass, it becomes intensive. Amount of energy is an intensive property, but you divide it with mass, it becomes small u, it becomes intensive. Extensive, internal energy becomes intensive. Volume is an extensive property, but it becomes intensive when you divide it with mass. Understood? So now let's go to the first law of thermodynamics. The change in internal energy can be caused when you add heat to the system, or let's say you do work on the system. Doing work on the
So, sir, volume intensive है property.
beta, volume itself is an extensive property. Specific volume is intensive.
Okay, sir.
Because you divide it with mass. Just remember that 10 kgs of rice. Instead of mass, now think of that if it in volume. Instead of 10 kgs of rice, think of it in volume. Let's say you go and buy 10 liters of milk and it costs you 1,000 rupees. So it means, and someone then goes and he buys 5 liters of milk. He has to pay 500 rupees. So it means your price is dependent on volume. But if you go to,
Yes, yes, sir.
it becomes an intensive property. Similarly, if you divide it with mass, it becomes an intensive property. Now, this is the first law of thermodynamics. First law of thermodynamics says that if you add some heat to the energy, it's going to give you a positive change. But if you do some positive work, what does positive work mean here? Work done on the surrounding. It means the system loses its energy. So it is going to cause a negative change. Remember, if we change our convention, now we consider work done on the system to be positive. So it must be, then we must have positive here. Remember that. Do you guys agree?
Yes, sir.
Must be positive here. But this will always be minus here. But this will always be minus here. Why? Because when the work is done on the surrounding, the volume is always positive. The change in volume is always positive. It means you expand. When you expand, it means the energy of the system decreases. So this is minus and this is right, of course. Now we put this delta U definition over here. We can put, of course, put it in form of, in form of intensive properties. So the change in enthalpy will become du plus, we take the differential. I hope you know how to take the differential. So ds must be equal to, now we put the value of du here from here. That is delta Q minus PdV, and then the differential of PdV is PdV plus VdP. So now this and this get cancelled, and this is what you get. So this is the very important equation. Now let's consider two. Did we not discuss the constant volume process and constant pressure process? Did we not discuss it? Okay, I
We
guess
have discussed.
I think we discussed it later, but now we can talk about it now. For example, if you do a constant pressure process, it means dP would be 0, right? It means that any energy that you add is going to change the enthalpy of your system. So, or in other words, if you measure the change in enthalpy of your system, you would be able to calculate how much energy was added to the system. You remember from PV diagram, we could not calculate that how much energy was added to the system or subtracted from the system. So now we create this new quantity called enthalpy. Enthalpy is cleverly made from the same variables, P and V, and internal energy. You see what my point is? We have cleverly made this new variable, which is made from pressure V and internal energy. But this time, if you measure the change in enthalpy, you are able to understand how much heat was added to your system. But the only condition is the process has to be constant pressure. We are surrounded by constant pressure processes. In your kitchen, the food is being cooked. That is a constant pressure process. The pressure remains 1 atm. So you are surrounded by constant pressure processes. Okay, now let's define the state of a working fluid. For example, let's say if you have a liquid and you start boiling it, you know its volume is increasing. Now suppose you increase the pressure at which your boiling occurs. You know that when you boil the water at higher pressure, it means you have, if you increase the external pressure, you know it is going to boil at higher temperature. Do you agree with that? And when
Yes, sir.
at higher temperature, the volume is also going to be larger. So this is called a saturated liquid line. So these are the boiling points of the water. At higher pressure, if you go to a higher pressure, it means you are going to have a higher temperature and also have a higher volume. This is why you have a slanted slope like this. So I hope these are different boiling points. And these are different evaporating points. These are separated vapor lines. So these are also, these are boiling points and these are saturated vapor lines. It means, for example, if you, how to say, so if your pressure is higher, right, your volume is going to be lower in a gas. Do you guys agree that if you try to, if your vapors are at a higher pressure, the volume is going to be smaller? Do you guys agree with this?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
At this point, all of your liquid is liquid. There is no vapor. At this point, all of your liquid has been converted into vapors. So if you combine this line, it gets something like this. Of course, if you extend it and you combine it, it is going to give you something like this, and there is going to be a peak. Let us understand what these peaks mean. So at this point Q, all of your all of your mass is in form of liquid, and let's say now you supply energy furthermore. So this is a constant pressure process. It's just like boiling. So now you keep on supplying some energy, the pressure remains constant, but all of your liquid has been converted into vapors. So this is called a saturated vapor line. And of course, if you do this process at a higher pressure, so you will have to supply less and less amount of energy to convert it into gas. So there comes a point, this is called a critical point. There comes a point where your liquid and vapors exist in equilibrium. So you have to virtually apply no energy to convert from liquid to vapor or vapor to liquid. So specific enthalpy of vaporization, it means the amount of energy that you have to supply from Q to Q prime or R to R prime or P to P prime. This would be specific enthalpy of vaporization. Why enthalpy? I told you in the previous slides I told you in the previous slide, at a constant pressure process, the amount of energy is the change in enthalpy. So if I can measure the change in enthalpy from Q to Q dot or Q prime, it means I'm measuring the amount of energy supplied. Do you guys agree? Because this is a constant pressure process. If I can measure the enthalpy change from Q to Q prime, it means I'm measuring the amount of energy. So we call it, instead of calling it specific heat of vaporization, we call it specific enthalpy of vaporization. Understood? So now we talk about saturation temperature lines. Saturation temperature lines. So for example, you know, when you at 100 degrees, let's say when you try to boil your water, the steam also remains at 100 degrees. So this is why these are constant temperature lines. They come like this at a pressure and they move like this and they go to T1. So this is a T1 line. You see, from here to here, your temperature remains constant, T1, T2, T3, whatever. Because when you are boiling your vapors from liquid to vapor, the temperature and pressure both remain constant. The volume changes. And what is the degree of superheat? Suppose you have a gas at temperature, let's say, I think this is a good example. I think I should zoom in. So now you have a gas at temperature T3 and its pressure is PQ. But you know that at PQ, the temperature should have been T2. At PQ or PQ prime, the temperature should have been T2. But for some reason, your temperature is T3. It means you had supplied so much energy. Means you had supplied energy from this to this, everything became vapor. Now you supply further more energy. The temperature rises to T3 now. You see, when you are supplying energy here, the temperature was going, was being used to convert the liquid into gas. Now everything is gas here. Now you supply further energy. Where is it going to go? It is going to increase the temperature now. So you have T3. So the degree of superheat would be T3 minus T2. The temperature that you should have, but the temperature that you do have. The difference between the temperature that you have, T3, and the temperature that you should have for us at a saturated line. So this is called the degree of superheat. Okay, any question in this? So you work with superheated gas in power plants. But if you remember, I had skipped the superheated part with you guys. We did only saturated vapors and saturated liquid. So what is the amount of how do you measure if your vapor is wet or dry? If you have a combination of liquid and vapor, that your vapor is wet. But if your vapor does not have any liquid, means you have dry vapor. It means this line is a dry vapor line, and this is no vapor line. So anything inside this curve which is P, Q, R, C, R prime, Q prime, and P prime, inside this curve we have wet vapor. Okay, and how do you measure it? If x is equal to 1, the vapor is dry, and if x is equal to 0, the vapor is totally wet, or it means you have no vapor, you have saturated liquid. So this is how you measure what is the percentage of wet vapor. What is the percentage of vapor in wet vapor? For example, if x is equal to 0.9, it means 90% of your mass is in vapor in your vapor form, and only 0.1% of your mass, or let's say 10% of your mass, is in liquid form. Okay, and we learn to use how to use the steam tables from Maconochie book. Okay, so far, thermodynamics only applies to system in equilibrium. We learned how to define pressure and temperature. The state variables are P, T, V, and sometimes the phase is also a state variable. We learned what an open, closed, and isolated system is, what is a reversible and irreversible process. Work, heat depend on path. We know that. For a reversible work, the work done is defined like this: P is equal to PdV. But if you consider work to be positive when done on the system, there must be a negative here. Remember that. So the change in internal energy of your system is equal to the amount of heat that you add and the amount of that work that is being done on the system. So far, we have learned how to define enthalpy, what are extensive and intensive properties. Now we go to ideal gas law. You have studied that ideal gas is equal to PV is equal to nRT. nR bar T. Remember, this was the different R that you studied. Now we know that N, what is N? N is the number of moles. How do we define number of moles? mass divided by molar mass. For example, if you have 56 grams of nitrogen, you know you have 2 moles. Why? Your mass is 56 and the molar mass is 28. Molar mass of nitrogen is 28. So I can write my n in this way. I hope nobody has any objection if I write my n like this. M divided by molar mass. Do you guys agree? So molar mass is a constant of a gas. R is a general gas constant, which is constant for every gas. 8.31 something. Okay. If you always want to use this equation, I'm happy with it. I do not mind. But in general, we use this equation in this form. How we convert this equation into this form? We take our molar mass and R and we combine them, R by molar mass, and we give it a new constant called R. Remember, this R is going to be different for every gas. Why? Because molar mass is going to be different for every gas. R bar is the same for every gas, 8.314. It is a universal constant. But molar mass is different for every gas. It means R is going to be different for every gas. Now, we define V by divided by mass, this becomes a specific volume. Generally, when you go to your higher studies, you will see the equation to be like this. And this is called state equation. Ideal gas law is the same ideal gas law, but it is called the state equation. Okay, this is the same thing as this thing. There is absolutely no difference. Okay, so I think I'm going to skip this part and we're going to go to next slide. And we did some examples of how to use ideal gas law. This would come in the later slides. So we are going to define Joule's law. Joule's law says that in an ideal gas, your internal energy is going to be only a function of temperature. It is not going to be a function of volume. Okay, generally your internal energy is a function of temperature and volume also. Why? Because if you have lower volume, you have intermolecular forces of attraction. So it means your internal energy changes. But in an ideal gas, in an ideal gas, okay, volume of molecule is finite in a real gas and intermolecular forces are present. So this is the reason why in a real gas, your internal energy is going to be a function of volume. These effects become prominent at low temperatures and high pressure, low volume. Therefore, the internal energy is a function of temperature and volume. You should understand why this is a function of volume. But in a real gas, volume of the molecules is negligible and intermolecular forces are also negligible. It means that the internal energy in an ideal gas is mainly kinetic or in form of only temperature. This was Joule's law. Please let me know if you have any question in Joule's law. Now, specific heats. The amount of, let's say, if you have 1 kg of water you are boiling and you are increasing its temperature from 25 degrees to 100 degrees, there must be some amount of energy that you add. If you increase the amount of mass, it means you have to supply more energy to get the same temperature raised. For example, if you want to raise your temperature by 75 degree water, it was 25 degree at room temperature. Now you want to boil it at 100 degrees. It means the delta T is constant, 75 degree. If you have 1 kg of mass, so you have, let's say, 110 joules. But if you have 2 kgs of mass, it means you have to supply 200 joules, right? It means the amount of energy that you have to supply to change the temperature by a particular amount is dependent on mass. Now we also, this must also be a extensive property. Now we make it intensive. We divide it with mass. So the amount of energy per unit mass is not only dependent on how much temperature you want to raise. Now mass is gone. We divide both sides with mass. So this is the quantity. So the amount of energy that you need to supply to raise your temperature by a certain amount depends on C. What is C? Specific heat. If the specific heat is large, it means you have to supply more energy. For example, specific heat of water is very large. You have to boil your temperature, you have to boil your water for a very long time. But if you try to raise the temperature of a steel bar, 200 degree, you put that steel bar on the stove, the temperature gets raised very quickly. You know that, right? It means the C, or the specific constant of metals, is low. As mentioned previously, heat added to a system depends on the path. So this depends on the path. So it means now we are going to talk about the constant volume process and a constant pressure process. So now you see, I'm writing my first law of thermodynamics with the positive here. We have switched the convention. We have switched to the convention when we add heat to the system or we add work to the system is positive. Okay, now you add heat to your system. I know it's big, so this is why I'm keep going on because we have to finish this thing. So the amount of heat that you add to your system and amount of work that you do on the system change your internal energy of your system. So this is the first law, which we have seen previously many times. So now, if you add your heat in a way that the volume remains constant. For example, now try to imagine this. You have a container. You try to heat it. The natural thing that would happen is that the volume of that container will try to increase, right? It means that system will try to transfer some of the work to the surrounding. That is the natural thinking, right? But suppose you do not allow its volume to change. You see my point? You do not allow its volume to change. It means the amount of energy that you are going to supply it is going to, it's going to change. All of it is going to change the internal temperature because no energy goes into expanding the gas. Why? Because the gas is not expanding. You are not allowing to expand it. So it means the dT must be large. It means the dT must be large. It means, let's say, if you supply 100 joules of energy to a system, it means the dT must be large. But for example, in another word, you allow it to expand. This is constant pressure process. Now you apply the same energy to the same amount of energy, to the same molecule or to the same system, but you allow it to expand. You know that your dT is not going to be as large. Do you guys agree with this? Do you guys agree that if you allow the gas to expand,
Sir.
the dT was not going to be as large? But the question is that you supplied the same amount of energy to both the systems. So how are you going to relate the amount of energy supplied to the temperature? You know that this dT is large, you know this dT is small, but this delta Q was the same. So it means you would get a smaller CV and you will get a larger CP. So that delta Q is always the constant. You know the dt is small here, so you have to have a larger Cp, and the dt is large here, so you can have a smaller Cv. So we can write this equation in other words, in other way, that Cv is equal to partial U by partial T, yani the change in internal energy when you change the temperature at a specific volume. Similarly, Cp is equal to the change in enthalpy with the change in temperature at a constant pressure, because at a constant pressure you change the enthalpy when you change the when you add the heat, you change the enthalpy. What do I mean by that? When you add heat to a constant volume process, you change the internal energy. Means all of your energy goes into raising the temperature. And you know, when you raise the temperature, you raise the kinetic energy. You raise the internal energy from Joule's law. But when you add energy to a constant pressure process, not only you change the internal energy, but you also change the enthalpy. Means you also, you also change the volume. You see my point? You also change the volume. It means your gas does some work. So instead, we cannot measure this change from internal energy. This is why we created the variable enthalpy. So if you change the enthalpy, it means the temperature is not going to be as big. So it means Cp has to be large. So this means Cp, or let's say when you integrate this thing and you suppose now you integrate this thing and you suppose that at absolute zero, enthalpy and internal energy are both zero. So you can integrate this thing and you will get this equation. And remember that Cp is always going to be larger than Cv. I gave you a reason. And this is the relation between Cp and Cv. I always remember this. How can you drive this thing? ds is equal to du plus vdp. You know this from remember we had PV here. So PV is equal to RT. So when you take the differential of PV, it means you are taking the differential of RT, and it means the differential will be RDT. And you see Cp and you remove duty from every place, you get this thing. So the derivation is given in the book. I think this part is not given in the book. This I'm taking from somewhere else. And of course, the ratio between Cp and Cv is called gamma, and that is 1.4 for the air. And you can relate Cp and Cv with help of R and gamma. These relations, please drive them yourself, or you can memorize them. It's your choice. Then we talk about the entropy. What is the entropy? Entropy is the disorder of your system. It means how much information you need to describe your system. You remember I gave you an example of a flask. An ideal flask will keep everything locked up inside, but a real flask will allow some of the high energy molecules to escape. And these molecules are escaping your room, then they are escaping your city, then they are escaping your country, and then they are escaping this continent. So it means the amount of information that we need to describe that system is increasing, or the amount of molecules or the amount of volume that we have to consider to account for that energy is increasing. So it means that the entropy is the disorder of your system is increasing. Or let's say microstates are the number of different possible arrangements. Now the number of possible arrangements of those molecules is increasing. Why? Because my molecules are just keep going away from me. So the number of possible arrangements they can have. Some molecules can go to China, which left my flask. Some molecules can go to US. So the number of possible arrangements that my original system is going into is constantly increasing. So this is why the entropy is increasing. So I'm going to skip this part. That energy also, this is the reason why the universe always moves in the direction of increasing entropy. This is the second law of thermodynamics. And this is why your heat always flows from hot to cold, not cold to hot. Otherwise, if you are saying that energy is free, if we say that energy is flowing from cold to hot, this does not violate the first law of thermodynamics. Why? Let's say this thing has 100 joules of energy, this thing has 10 joules of energy. I take 5 joules from here, give it to this. So this becomes 105 joules of energy, this becomes 5 joules of energy. Did I violate the first law of thermodynamics? No. The energy is still conserved. But I violated the second law of thermodynamics. This is why the second law of thermodynamics was needed. It means that you cannot run your engine with a single reservoir. You have to have losses. It means a real engine should look like this. You have a heat source, means the heat source. Then you have an engine that converts the heat energy into kinetic energy or work, and it rejects some heat in the surrounding. So this is the real engine. You can't have a engine like this which converts all of your thermal energy into work. You cannot have anything like this. Why? Because we are living in a real world. I think this should be the last slide because we are at the second law of thermodynamics. Okay, some definitions. What is an isothermal process? A process in which your temperature remains constant. What is an isobaric process? In which the pressure remains constant. What is an adiabatic process? A process in which no heat is added. What is an polytropic process? A process that follows this path. N can be anything, 1, 2, 3, whatever. A process that follows a path like this is a polytropic process. An isentropic process is a process. Isentropic process is a process in which there is no heat added and there is no entropy change. In fact, there is no entropy change. Entropy remains constant in an isentropic process. So first law of thermodynamics says that dD is equal to this. First law for a reversible process, the work can be defined like this. So your first law takes this form. You have seen this form many times now. So PV is equal to RT. So what are we doing here? Okay, so I'm for few previous relations, this we have, I'm thinking I'm going to skip you this derivation you are going to do yourself. This is the same slide we had previously. Okay, now the change in entropy. The change in entropy, when you add heat to your system, you know that your molecules have more energy. So there can be more possibilities of arranging your system. So it means the amount of entropy increases. This is an ideal system. This entropy increase can be reversed. You add some energy to your system, the entropy increases. You take the same amount of energy out from your system, your entropy is going to go to the previous value. This is the ideal change in your entropy. This is only because of the heat added. If you take this heat out, the entropy will go back. But in reality, your entropy changes because of two things: the amount of heat added and due to friction and other possibilities. Of course, you can give heat to your system, the entropy increase. Now you can take back the heat from your system, the entropy will decrease, but it will not go to back to the same value. Why? Because this thing is not in your control. This entropy will increase whatever you do. Okay, so this is why This is why DS is always positive. This is always positive. The entropy change because of friction and everything is always positive. Whether you are adding heat or subtracting heat, at best it can be zero. If the system can be made frictionless, at best this thing would be zero. But it will always be zero in reality. It will always be greater than zero in reality. Now let's talk about this. It means the entropy change is always going to be greater than the entropy change because of heat. This is the entropy change because of heat, which was reversible. But in a real world, the entropy change is always going to be larger than this. This is the amount of entropy change only because of the heat added. And that can be reversible. You take out the heat from your system, the entropy will decrease. But in the real world, your entropy is always going to increase. So it means in an adiabatic process where you're not even adding any heat, even then the entropy will increase because we are living in a real world. So now we talk about the isentropic process. So this is the equation for an isentropic process. How we drive it? We are just driving it now. So the first law, delta Q is equal to TDS, right? Delta Q is equal to, this is delta Q is equal to TDS. So this is the first law of thermodynamics. Du is equal to delta Q minus PdV. Now we take minus PdV here. So we have delta Q here, du plus PdV. This comes from the first law of thermodynamics. And this comes from the enthalpy definition. Enthalpy definition is dH is equal to du plus PdV plus VdP. Now you add or replace du. Du is equal to delta Q minus PdV. Remember? Now replace du with the definition of du. Then you will get this and this equation. Okay. Now du, internal energy, is only a function of temperature. Du can be written as CV dt. You remember that? Du can be written as CV dt. We read it in the previous slides. And PdV remains same, and we divide with T on both sides. So when we divide with P by T, remember PV is equal to RT. When I divide P by V, I get R by V. It's the same thing. Now I integrate it. So this will give me natural log. I integrate this is again going to give me natural log. We are doing the similar thing here. And we get the natural logs. This is one equation. This is the second equation. They are the same things written in different state variables. This is written in temperature and volume. This is written in temperature and pressure. You remember, you know PV is equal to RT. If you know P or V, you can get temperature. If you know any two, you can get the third. You can see it here also. This equation is written in temperature and volume. You can convert into pressure and temperature. Or you can convert it into a pressure and volume. Same thing. Whatever you like to do. Now you integrate this, Now for an isentropic process, this should be zero. For an isentropic process, this should be zero. Same entropy. And from this, you get this equation. And from this, you get this equation. I leave this to you. You have to do it yourself. Okay. What is an isentropic process? Look at this equation. An isentropic process is a process in which no heat is added and it is also reversible. It means the entropy change due to irreversibility is zero. Remember the definition of isentropic process. Isentropic process is both adiabatic, means no heat is added. Try to understand it in this way. Your entropy change can come from two sources. Either you add heat or there is some friction or some irreversibilities. The entropy change that comes from heat addition can be reversed. You add heat, the entropy increases. You subtract heat, the entropy decreases by the same amount. It means this entropy change, which you can see here, is reversible. But this is irreversible entropy change. This happens because of friction and losses. So it means an isentropic process must be both adiabatic, no heat added, and must also be an ideal system. It means this also should be zero. So only then that system can be considered isentropic. If the system is only adiabatic, it means the entropy can still increase. Entropy is not going to increase because of heat added. Why? Because the system is adiabatic. But the entropy can increase because of irreversibilities, just like that. Just like I have showed you here. A real adiabatic process is not isentropic. Because in isentropic process, it has to be both Adiabatic, this should be 0 delta Q and also irreversible. It means this should be, it also should be reversible. This should be 0. There should be no irreversibilities. Any questions? Any questions from any of the slides? So this is the syllabus of your midterm. If you do not have any questions, then I'm going to end this class. And we will meet after the midterm, inshallah. And good luck with your exam. Any questions? Your exam is on next Tuesday. So we will meet next Tuesday, and we will meet for the on the Monday following your midterm.
सर मिड टर्म के बाद भी क्लास होगी कोई?
Of course. We have a lot of things to cover. We have to start heat ventilation and air conditioning.
सर फर्स्ट 7 लेक्चर्स है ना?
Yes, first 7 lectures. Yes. Okay, ji, thank you so much. Allah Hafiz.
Allah Hafiz, sir.
Allah Hafiz, sir.
Allah Hafiz, sir. Thank you.